Dick Gregory was an American entertainer and comedian who made great strides in equality during his lifetime. He was born October 12, 1932 in St. Louis, Missouri. In 1954, Gregory was drafted into the U.S. Army, and that's where he found his passion for telling jokes. He took part in a talent contest and won in his platoon. He was then moved to the Army's entertainment division. This is where he could really hone his skill and develop his talent for entertainment. After finding his love for comedy overseas, Gregory returned to the United States to try and start up a comedy career. Gregory would use his jokes and storytelling skills to spread the message of the civil rights movement to white audiences, and was one of the first black comedians to find success with white audiences and began to tour at white nightclubs all over Chicago and America. Dick Gregory has said in interviews that he attributes his successful career to Playboy's Hugh Hefner, who shortly after Gregory returned from the Army saw talent in him and would invite him to perform at his nightclubs throughout Chicago. In fact, Gregory made history in 1961 when he was invited onto Jack Parr's Tonight Show. He wanted to be invited to sit on the couch like any other white entertainer was, and in fact, he became the first African-American guest on the show and was even a recurring guest for many years. Gregory would use his newfound power and popularity in the comedy scene to spread the message of civil rights all over America through the power of the television and the reach that it had with the different communities. After finding success on Jack Parr's Tonight Show, Dick Gregory would go on to use his talent in comedy to spread the message fighting segregation and other racial issues. He would help to bring these issues to the national spotlight because he had fans who were both white and black. And through his comedy, the message that hate was still in America was more easily digested by the white audience members. In the early 1960s, when Gregory's career was taking off and he first made strides in the civil rights community, he befriended civil rights activist Medgar Evers and went to Mississippi to march for black voting rights. And after Medgar Evers was murdered in 1963, Gregory gave up performing full-time to become more involved in the civil rights movement. Dick Gregory wasn't just a civil rights activist in America, because in 1964, Gregory traveled to the Soviet Union to protest the Soviet treatment of black soldiers. In 1964, 3 men were killed: James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Mickey Schwerner. Dick Gregory was the main driving force in finding these bodies and uncovering the conspiracy that the lynchings were government-sponsored, and the sponsor was the Mississippi state government. Gregory was on a disarmament protest tour through Europe, and when he received the news of the deaths while he was in Moscow, he was on the first flight home. Him and a crew of 16 cars went on a search for the slain men. Gregory became suspicious of the sheriff and other lawmen because while their search was cut short by the police, they were still allowed to question them. And after a brief meeting with the sheriff, Gregory released a $25,000 bounty for information on the whereabouts of the activists. Shortly after this, the FBI also released a bounty for information. Gregory was the one who received the letter, though, and upon finding the bodies, he became a hero. On May 18, 1964, Gregory took part in pickets to protest the segregation of schools in Milwaukee. He would speak to students at Freedom Universities, which were churches and centers in the community where students would be sent to learn. And he told them, if we are successful with this revolution, people all over the world are going to recognize what we did to the greatest nation in the world without firing a shot. Gregory was very passionate about civil rights, and he would even go on to run for the Chicago mayorship in 1967, but he lost to Richard J. Daley, and he would even go on to run as a write-in for the presidency in 1968. However, he also lost that. Gregory was very active in the civil rights community, and in 1967, during the 200 days of marching, he went and marched, and he told the marchers, "I came here to be with you until it's over, one way or another." And during a march that took place on October 8th, he and 10 others blocked traffic to be able to let the marchers through. And they were arrested and found guilty, and they were all fined $100 and kept in jail. Throughout the 1970s, Dick Gregory expanded his activist views and became an advocate for vegetarianism, and would go on hunger strikes to protest against issues like racial injustice, the Vietnam War, and the treatment of Native Americans, and the apartheid in South Africa. Over the next few decades, Gregory would travel the country speaking on different issues, and he would also perform comedy shows in St. Louis and New York nightclubs. Gregory died of heart failure in 2017, and this would be the end to a great legacy of activism and comedy that sticks with us till today. Dick Gregory made strides in the comedy community and across America through his work for the civil rights movement and his work at making white audiences more comfortable with a black entertainer. By making the racial issues more palatable for white people and spreading his message on the television, he would bring the fight to people's homes and let people know what was really going on in America.